What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk live from St. Vincent College here in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined once again by my main man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. This is the last day as we head out, or as I head out. I won't lie to you. This last day, I have a playlist ready to go. Always. I always have that like last day training camp playlist, all the bangers that I listen to coming up here, compiled, ready to rock. That last drive as I pull down, and rain, wind, tornado, snow, I care less. All the windows are down, and you're just cruising on out of here for the last time, getting in that last little scent of manure, because we are in Latrobe. So this is, this is not a nothing. And it's a good time. I'm thankful for my month-long journey up here. Excited to hit the road. Excited for the season to begin. But with that, we got so much to talk about. Before we dive into everything, I'll ask you, as I do every single day, how you feel, my friend?
I'm feeling good. A little bittersweet today. I like seeing you at Latrobe. I like seeing really the Steelers practicing at Latrobe. Not that it's not nice to see them practicing and always watch football in general, but when it's at Latrobe, it just feels pure. So it's always a sad day whenever they depart from St. Vincent College and head back to the South Side. But there is one good thing that comes out of it, and that is Steelers football, regular season football, is just that much closer.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's training camp is different because there's no drama. I mean, this year there's some drama, but there was no on-field drama. There's never any on-field drama. We are just looking at football, watching guys get better, seeing who the winners, seeing who the losers are. After this, the regular season becomes real. The news cycle becomes real. Everything that happens matters. It's an exciting time, but it's a sad time at the same time. So I'm grateful once again for my time out here. Today, we'll dive into the winners from training camp. There weren't many losers. We'll dive into a couple of them, but really it's a long list of winners out here at St. Vincent College. On top of, nothing new with Brandon Aiyuk, except for the fact that, I don't know if you guys saw, but he showed up. Shout out my boy Grant Cohn. Showed up to San Francisco 49ers practice in, if you could believe this one, 49ers gear. Who would have thought, man? Who would have thought? I mean, if you ask me, it's over, right? That's the end of the line for the Steelers' hopes.
Well, it wasn't just 49ers gear. We have to be specific here. It was a 49ers red cutoff that he was wearing. I don't know. It was... He showed up at practice. He's been at practice the last couple of weeks. I have no idea, obviously, when or if an actual official tweet or official signing is going to happen. But from what I've learned over the last couple of months is I'm going to wait until something actually happens to know that this is actually done and over with.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard over the last 24 hours, nothing has changed. The Steelers remain waiting. That yesterday's chaotic hurricane of the Steelers and the 49ers, they have a deal in place. This is crazy. Turned into, oh, you mean that they've had a deal in place for days and that the 49ers are just waiting to hear back from Brandon Aiyuk? Like, who would have thought? But that's where we stand. The red cutoff, man. If you had asked me, that is the sign. That's the sign that, you only sign contracts in red 49ers cutoffs in San Francisco. That's actually the rule of thumb. So it's a crazy time, man. We're going to dive into the latest on that, but really where the Pittsburgh Steelers go if that does not end with a Brandon Aiyuk trade to the Pittsburgh Steelers, because there's some belief that maybe there's another name or a couple other names that they'd approach, because at this point they've put all their eggs in one basket. It's hard to imagine that they're just going back to nothing and dealing with what they have. But first, let's talk a little bit with the winners of training camp, because we leave Latrobe for the last time. Like I said, grateful day, big day. This is, let me break it down to you from my side of things today. Okay. So you leave early. This is the only day of camp besides the first day of camp that you get here like 45 minutes early for some reason. It's like the last day of school. Like, you're like, all right, let's get to school. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm cool with it. I'm at the bus stop 15 minutes early because I'm ready to go. You get up here early. You devour food. Like, I'm talking, they give you a breakfast spread in the morning. Shout out the Pittsburgh Steelers. Shout out St. Vincent College. The staff here is unbelievable. They give you a breakfast spread. I ate cereal before I came here because I got to start my day with some Special K. They tell me that's how you lose weight. Then slammed a parfait, slammed a McMuffin. Won't lie to you, ate some fruit as well. like 4 coffees, went to lunch, ate way more than 4 slices of pizza, a burger, ice cream, 2 cookie sandwiches, and a brownie for the road. I'm feeling fantastic, let me tell you. And then you watch some football. So shout out to the crew up here. It's a fantastic time. I'm sad to leave, but we learned a lot, dude. We learned a ton. And I want to break down just a handful of winners. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball, then we'll dive into the defensive side of the ball. I think the biggest winners, here we go. It's already starting. Brandon Aiyuk watched 49ers practice on sideline near goal line. I mean, that's near the goal line by himself. Oh, wait. Until team drills reached red zone. General manager John Lynch gave him a handshake and pat on the back. BA looked interested in a red t-shirt, black shorts. I mean, dude.
It's been minute-to-minute updates, but I think we're getting a little too many minute-to-minute updates at this point.
Yeah, this is hilarious. All right. For those of you who actually want to talk some football and not Brandon Aiyuk's wardrobe and where he's standing at practice, the winners on offense, let's start there because I think there's some good ones and some optimistic ones. The biggest one in my head, obviously Pat Freiermuth, but we've talked so much about Pat Freiermuth, but Darnell Washington looks like a guy who's going to be very involved in the Steelers offense, who is going to make some noise in both the receiving and the running game this season. He caught a great pass over DeMonte KZ today that I thought was, I mean, it had everybody fired up. The rest of the tight ends who have really turned into a very solid group of guys, not just as players, but also teammates. They're always getting rowdy on the sideline. It's kind of cool. We've come to the conclusion, a group of us here at St. Vincent, that the tight end group is kind of like the frat house of the Steelers locker room, and it's kind of cool to watch. It's fun to watch. But Darnell Washington looks like a guy who's ready to break out and have a massive year. And right next to him is Michael Pruitt, who came into camp. You didn't really have expectations for him. You looked at him as the last man out. There's really no need for this. He's an older dude who never really emerged into a star in the NFL, has played a role on a number of teams, but is probably just a body to help people adjust to Arthur Smith's offense. I think he's come in here and he's proven a lot, and in my eyes has earned a roster spot for the Pittsburgh Steelers because he could do everything. He could play special teams. He could catch the football. He could pass block. He could play fullback. He could play tight end. I like him pretty much everywhere. He's not as big as you thought he was going to be, but you could tell he packs a punch. Big fan of Michael Pruitt. When it comes to the wide receivers, Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson highlight that list by a mile, my friend. Van Jefferson looks good. Van Jefferson looks like a guy who you could look at and say, maybe he is a number 2 in Pittsburgh. And that's not ideally the best situation for the Steelers, but he looks like he could play the part. Now, that could change, and there are a lot of teams out there who did not want anything to do with Van Jefferson, and there's probably reason for that. But maybe, just maybe, he turns into something here in Pittsburgh. He looked good in the preseason opener. He looked great during training camp, like great during training camp. Never had a bad day, never had a missed pass. It just kind of felt like Van Jefferson was taking some steps forward. And right next to him is Calvin Austin, who you think that how open he was in the preseason from time to time was just like mistakes, but that seems to happen every day at training camp practice. And because of that, you have to think maybe it's just Calvin Austin. Maybe Calvin Austin is just a dude who gets open, and that's huge. I mean, he said it himself the other day that he was probably 25%. He got to showcase 25% of his skill in Matt Canada's offense. He's excited for this year. I mean, that's massive. I believe that Calvin Austin's going to take a huge step forward and be involved in this offense. I'm a big fan of both of those. Jack Colletto will add to that list, but we'll wait and see. If things have quieted down for Jack Colletto over the last couple of days, I want to see them get fired back up. And Russ has looked good, but so is Justin Fields. So I think the competition is certainly there on the offensive line. And then I will let you kind of dive into this list here. Zach Frazier, is my biggest winner by a mile. That dude looks the part. At this point in training camp, at this point in the offseason, and in the summer, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they got a center man, and his name's Zach Frazier. And he looks like a monster. He looks like the next guy, like the next center of the NFL, that big name that everybody should know of. That's what he looks like. Is a great pick by the Steelers. I think a second-round pick could turn into a steal for him in a couple of years. Great move. He looks like he should be the starter. Nate Herbig obviously left with an injury today. We don't know what that injury is, but that's a big step for Zach Frazier. I think he's right there to earn the starting job. He's my winner on the offensive line. Spencer Anderson could add his name in there as well, getting some starting reps and looking good from time to time. But I still think there's some growth there. Zach's my big one. That's my list. On offense, it's easy. Pat Freiermuth, Mike Cole Pruitt, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Zach Frazier. And then you could toss the quarterbacks in there if you want to, but I'm trying to avoid the quarterback situation as we progress through there. Anybody stand out? Anybody you think I missed?
The one person that stands out a lot to me is Van Jefferson. I mean, there were questions of who's going to emerge as the wide receiver 2 in-house. Obviously, there's all the, outside noise with Aiyuk and everything else going on. I mean, Juju has been a topic of conversation this week, but Van Jefferson's the guy that has really stepped up in Latrobe over the last couple of weeks. You talked about it yesterday, the 300 catches after practice. The one day that I was there, he looked gassed, and I was like, oh, 300 catches. Yeah. You think about that and you're like, yeah, that's a nice little added bonus. And then you look at them actually doing it and how long they're out there doing it. And you're like, man, this really, it's more than just catching a ball, right? It teaches you a lot more. It molds a lot more. And I think that watching him in team drills and everything else like that, from what I've seen, this is a guy that has really impressed me based on what my opinions were of him when they showed up a couple weeks ago. I'm excited to see what he does with the opportunity because, as you mentioned, he's been in a lot of offenses that have a lot of options. Right now, the Steelers, they have some options, but if he can emerge, he can become one of those, second, third options for the Steelers offense in their passing game. And if that's the case, maybe he does have, kind of a revival type year where you see him look like he did in his best season back in LA.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's my big thing is the last time Van Jefferson got a shot to be the number 2, he put up 800 yards, and that's not bad. And maybe that's all he's looking for. Now, I'm not banking on that. I think that's the sign here is I'm not trying to get overly optimistic about Van Jefferson, but I am excited about the potential. And I believe that he's shown the potential to this point. And obviously it comes with some caution, and you have to toss the warning signs out there every chance you get. But I'm excited about Van Jefferson, man. And I think that he's got the speed and the hands and is putting in the work to make this happen. And sometimes all you need is that opportunity. He's still young enough to make that opportunity last. I'm excited to see where they're at, see where he is at by the end of the preseason. On the defensive side of the football, the list is probably just as long. You start with the defensive line, obviously. Keanu Benton is a monster, my friend. A monster. That guy didn't have a bad play out here. In 3 weeks of training camp and a weekend of football where he only played 2-3 series, Keanu Benton looked fantastic. He looked so good at every moment, in every opportunity. It was crazy. And then on top of that, you have Montravius Adams, who looks just as good. DeMarvin Leal suffered an injury. Got to see how far he comes back, but I think DeMarvin's got a ton of upside and looks like he's finally starting to take those steps forward. At linebacker, Peyton Wilson is the guy everybody wants to talk about, and I think that's true, but I'm going to toss another name out here, this one off the edge, Jacoby Windman. That guy is a name to watch in these last 2 preseason games. I'm excited to see what he brings. He's looked good the last couple of weeks at training camp. I was talking to some Michigan State alum today who were telling me, if you go back and watch that team the last 2 years, it is clear as day that Jacoby is the best player by far in that roster and on that defense. So it's exciting to see what he can bring to the team. In the secondary, I mean, Deshaun Elliott is the big one. Beanie Bishop's another one. And while he is a winner, I think the Steelers are becoming a little bit more cautious about him being a starter and starting to say, okay, look, yeah, it was cool. He looked really good in camp. Didn't look that great in the preseason game. He's got to have another opportunity to prove himself. But with Grayland Arnold getting hurt today, you got to wonder what's going on there. So he would be a name to watch, both Beanie and Grayland. And I guess Corey Trice could be tossed in there as a winner late. He's a guy that has taken a lot of first-team reps in Dante Jackson's absence, a guy that the Steelers clearly trust. I don't know how much trust he can build on, or I don't know how much trust he's deserved, but he looks good. He's a name I'm keeping an eye on in this next preseason game, and I think he gets the start, and I'm curious to see what he looks like against Buffalo. But that would be my list. Not as long as offense, but I believe it's a good one.
Yeah, the one that obviously stands out is kind of the role reversal from OTAs to training camp with Darius Rush and Corey Trice. Trice obviously wasn't really participating in OTAs and minicamp. They were still slow playing his return from that knee injury that he suffered last year. But since he's gotten back on the field, he's progressively gotten more and more opportunity from the Steelers defense. And I think he's taken those opportunities and he's looked pretty good in them. Meanwhile, Darius Rush is a guy who was red hot through all of OTAs. And then, you show up to Latrobe and it seems like he's kind of faded into the back a little bit to the point where you put out your 53-man roster projection after the first training preseason game. And Rush was a guy that he's in a kind of a scary position right now. He might not make the roster out of training camp. It's somebody that there's still a couple weeks to go here before they go from 90 down to 53. And Rush is going to have to really start making a name for himself. Whereas Trice seems like he's comfortably on the inside looking out, and it doesn't seem like anybody's really going to catch him. And it seems like he's destined to kind of be that cornerback 3. Maybe not at the beginning of the season, but it is destined to be that by the end of this season.
Yeah, I'm a little bit bummed out at Darius Rush. Like, I thought Darius Rush looked like the guy in OTAs and minicamp, and he hasn't been the guy here. Like, he's taken such a step backwards. Maybe not play-wise, but just hasn't excited the way that he used to excite us in the South Side. And maybe that'll come back in these next two. Maybe it's just Latrobe. Maybe it's, early mornings. He doesn't like sleeping in the dorm. Who knows? But
too many Dino's wings.
Too many Dino's. I mean, that could happen a lot and very easily. I don't know. I was disappointed in him. And at the same time, I think that you get Cam Sutton back in 8 weeks, but you need Corey Trice to be that guy. Otherwise, if you don't see that right from the jump here in these last 2 games, you might have to go out and get somebody at corner, because that is their one glaring need is a third cornerback. And I don't know that they have it right now unless Corey becomes that guy. Those are my names to watch. Some winners from training camp as we move forward. Good times. Excited to get out of here, but at the same time, appreciative that we got to watch some football up close and share it with everybody. And also appreciative everybody who gave me a shout out and said hi, and I got to see while I was out here. All right, let's dive into another topic of conversation, a topic of conversation that we have to talk about that is every day, the Brandon Aiyuk situation, but really what comes next. Because if Brandon Aiyuk is showing up at training camp, okay, I don't know if you heard, okay, in a red shirt, in a red cutoff shirt. It looks like a deal's pretty much done. If you had to ask me, look, the optimism's here. And the more and more I talk to people, the more that I find myself realizing that the optimism for the Steelers is real, and it's a very good possibility, but it very much so is a backup plan at this point. That the San Francisco 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk kind of both want a deal to get done. And if nothing gets done, they're going to ship them to Pittsburgh. But if a deal gets done, where do the Steelers go from there? And I think that's the biggest question here, because you could sit here and talk all day long about how the Steelers don't need somebody and they can't give up that much money, and there isn't that many players that you pay that much money in the NFL. And I might agree with every single point of that. But at the same time, it doesn't matter what my opinion is or what your opinion is or what anybody's opinion is. The Steelers put all their cards on the table here, and they said, we're going to give you a trade for Brandon Aiyuk, and we're going to pay him more money than we pay TJ Watt. That's a statement, my friend. And I got a hard time believing, as good as Brandon Aiyuk is, that this is strictly Brandon Aiyuk. That this is, we just want the 49ers wide receiver. That's the only one that we're willing to do this for. We think he's the greatest of all time. I don't see that being the case. I think the Steelers are more so saying, we need a wide receiver. We're very aware that we need a wide receiver of this talent level for whatever reason that is. And they chose Brandon Aiyuk to go and pursue. Now, if he doesn't work out, do you go somewhere else? Do the Steelers look elsewhere? And even if you don't believe that the Steelers should look elsewhere, do you think that they do? Because there's a name like CeeDee Lamb out there who doesn't sign a contract. The Cowboys, Jerry Jones said it the other day, we're in no rush. There's no urgency to get a deal done with CeeDee Lamb right now. Seems like they're talking their way out of a situation in Dallas. Do you make those phone calls? Do you believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers continue this wide receiver hunt if Brandon Aiyuk does not come to Pittsburgh?
I think they do. And for the simple reason that everything else that Omar Khan has done this summer has kind of skewed towards the fact that he's trying to get them to win a Super Bowl this year. He's trying to do everything that he can to, without overly harming the future of the organization, give them a chance to win the Super Bowl this year. And I think with that comes the fact that he's going to look into all of these receivers, knowing that that is an area of weakness on the Steelers roster. Now, does that mean they're going to become serious contenders for a guy like CeeDee Lamb? Does that mean that they're going to, shell out a massive trade offer and then a massive contract for CeeDee Lamb? No. But at the very least, Omar Khan is going to do his due diligence. He's going to keep the door open for some of these moves, because all of the moves that he has made has said that I want to win a Super Bowl this year, or I want to win multiple playoff games this year. And to do that, you have to be open to keeping your eyes out for players that are going to improve your roster. And the one area that needs improved the most is probably wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. And again, like, you don't have to, nobody's got to agree that CeeDee Lamb is the next guy or as good as Brandon Aiyuk, or, you got to go get Tyreek. I don't care. You can name a dozen wide receivers. CeeDee Lamb is just the other one that makes sense. He's the only other guy that you could look at and say, things seem to be aligned the same way as Aiyuk, so you could pursue that one. The Steelers just want to get it done, and I believe that they'll continue this journey afterwards. If Aiyuk signs, they didn't do this for nothing. You know what I mean? And I got a hard time believing that if they were willing to do all this, that they're just going to settle. And you could believe, again, like, it has nothing to do. If it was up to me, I wouldn't make any of these trades. I'd give Brandon Aiyuk for a third-round pick, ideally, and I'd pay him $28 million, and I'd be very okay with that, because a wide receiver in 2-3 years is going to be worth 35 plus, not $28 million a season. You're going to have Brandon Aiyuk for a steal. That's just how it works. I'd give that up, and I'd give that up for CeeDee Lamb too, but I'm not giving up a second-round pick, a first-round pick. I just don't feel that that's necessarily worth it at this point in the Steelers, where the Steelers stand and the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'd give Van Jefferson a shot. I'd give Calvin Austin a shot. I'd see what could happen with the running game and with a mobile quarterback before I do anything. But the Steelers want a guy, man, and I believe that a guy is going to be pursued. Would CeeDee Lamb top your list of potential candidates as the next guy to pursue?
Right now, of the ones that are available, yes. But again, if ones become available in the future, I would imagine that CeeDee Lamb is probably going to get knocked down if a guy like DK Metcalf does indeed become available. But everything that we've heard so far this offseason is, that's smoke and not fire. The DK Metcalf is not going anywhere. So if he's not on the table, then yeah, CeeDee Lamb to me is probably the top option right now. But again, things are fluid, especially in the trade market in the NFL.
Yeah. Oh, always constantly revolving. I'd be shocked if DK ended up on it just doesn't make any sense. Like, Seattle just be like, you know what, man, we don't need to win this season. Whatever. Like, who cares? We have a new head coach. We're trying to lose. That's what we're trying to do. Wouldn't make any sense. I think CeeDee does top the list. I think it'd be very hard to come up with a name that would be better than CeeDee. I mean, you could have your issues with CeeDee Lamb, and there are issues to be had. Guy was 1,700 yards and 12 touchdowns last season.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Like, that's an impressive stat line that you could build off of. I think that you could get that done. And I also think that you could, look, you might have to pay him 30 instead of 28, but I think that you can make that happen. Unfortunate news on the pit end here. Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison went down and has been placed on a cart in practice.
Jeez. The Vikings should just not practice. Like, the Vikings should just say, we'll see you week 1. JJ McCarthy out now for the year, potentially. That's rough for them.
Yeah, that's terrible. It is. It's a tough time, but shout out Jordan Addison, man. Good dude. Wish him the best. All right. With that said, we'll talk some CeeDee Lamb, or we did talk some CeeDee Lamb. We talked some Brandon Aiyuk. We talked where we're going. Let's answer some questions. If you guys have more of them, please toss them in the chat. We'll answer all of them before we head out of here. Last day of training camp as we head out one last time. Let's start with Brian's here. Oh, never mind. I thought it said who was the loser of training camp or of the quarterback battle.
Mm-hmm.
Nah. Let's dive into it. What do we got?
Let's instead go to Malcolm Fox, who asks, I think Daijun Edwards looked really good in his preseason debut. Do you think he worked himself into a roster spot?
I don't. I don't think he did enough during training camp to make a roster spot. I mean, maybe in the next 2 weeks of the preseason he does, but Cordero Patterson, they paid him, they guaranteed him some money. I don't think it makes any sense to do so. But that being said, I'm not the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they feel kind of tied to him. They're going to try to make it work. And to be honest, on top of that, the guy that I'm keeping of the running back group who looked very good in the preseason opener and has looked very good in training camp is Jonathan Ward. He's looked very impressive in all facets of the game, and he would be the guy that I was keeping if I was keeping somebody else at running back.
Kaleo wants to know, when will Roman Wilson be cleared to play? Any updates on his injury?
No updates yet. I was watching him today, just kind of hang out. Doesn't have the ankle brace on, which is good. But we'll kind of see what happens and continue to evaluate it. If I had to guess, he's not going to play in the preseason. Maybe try to get back for week 1. I wouldn't imagine he starts the season on IR, but you just never know. I think right now they're just going to take it slow.
Let's go to Jared's question, which is, I know it's only been one preseason game, but do you think DeMarvin Leal can step up into that number 4 pass rusher spot after Marcus Golden retired?
I do, actually. I do. I think that's an option for the Steelers to put Leal on the outside when needed as that 4th guy and maybe call somebody up from the practice squad from time to time when you really need a pass rusher for a certain situation. I think that could work out. I don't want Leal to only be an outside guy. I think he's much better on the inside, but that's where I stand with DeMarvin Leal. I do think DeMarvin Leal has played really good on the inside. I just worry about screwing that up if he plays too much on the outside. That being said, he did look good during the preseason and during training camp on the outside, and I think he can make it work. Before we keep diving into questions, we do want to take a break real quick, give a shout out to our boys over at BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you ever found yourself scrolling on social media, maybe spending too much time on whatever platform you're addicted to and thinking, man, why am I feeling down? Why do I find myself not finding the joy that social media is supposed to give me? That's because comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. But therapy can help. It can help you focus on what you want instead of what other people have, so you can start living your best life. I'm somebody who's advocated for therapy for a long time. You constantly see me wearing the sweatshirt, going to therapy is cool. I've reaped the benefits for years, and I think everybody who's thinking about it should add that to their agenda as well, because in one way or another, it's very helpful. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/allsteelers today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/allsteelers. All right, we're back. Shout out our boys at BetterHelp. So I was reading the comments. That's if you guys ever wonder what I do during like commercial, like ad breaks, I just sit here and read everything you guys are saying in the chat. So shout out, you guys. Appreciate you. All right, what else we got?
Let's go to J Chap's Snack Reviews. Says, yo, what does Russ have to do this weekend to be considered a great showing for him? 1 scoring drive, 2 touchdowns. What does he got to do this weekend?
I think the offense just has to look sharp. Like, I'm not into the scoring during the preseason. I could care less about who wins or loses a football game in the preseason. It doesn't matter. I could care less about getting in the end zone during a preseason. It helps, but I want to see how fluid your offense looks. Like, I just want to see everything look like it was put together, look like Russ was finding the open guys. Like, this offense had a clue what was going on. Like, you could tell the last preseason game with Justin Fields out there, it was a good game, and people were harsh on him, including myself. But overall, the offense, outside of some bad blocks and some fumbled snaps, ran a very fluid offense. And if you could continue to do that, I think that's what you're looking for. I don't expect Russ to get more than like 2 series, maybe 3 max, but I don't think he's going to get much out there. I think they're going to toss him out there for a little bit and then take him out. I don't know if he'll have much time to actually prove himself to do anything.
Let's go over to Steven's question next, who asks, do you think the Steelers could be the first team to implement a successful 2-quarterback system that can always keep the defenses guessing?
I don't know. Depends on what you consider a 2-quarterback system. Like I think that when people say a 2-quarterback system, my brain always goes like some guys playing 3 snaps, some guys playing 2 snaps a series. Instead, I could see it going where Russ plays 99% of the game and Justin comes in for like 3 snaps a game. Like where that's just what they're looking for. I could see that, and I think that could be successful, but if that's what you consider a 2-quarterback system, then yes, I think it could be successful, but I don't know if I'd consider that a 2-quarterback system.
Vibing with the Dogs wants to know, does Russell Wilson play this weekend? Because he didn't sound certain during his media scrum.
From what I understand, I mean, the Steelers said it, Mike Tomlin said it after the Houston game that Russell Wilson would play this week. I expect him to play this week, just 2 series. That's all I get. Like, just get out there, warm up. This guy spent the whole entire game last week in pads with a helmet on the sideline. Get him out of the game, man. He's itching. So I think he gets 2, maybe 3 series.
Steven wants to know, is there a real possibility for Juju Smith-Schuster to come back?
Yeah, there is. I mean, from what I've been told, that this Juju Smith-Schuster is quote-unquote in play for the Steelers at this point in the offseason, and that if Brandon Aiyuk doesn't work out, they could look at Juju as an alternative. I don't know if he's the best alternative, but the Steelers are certainly interested, yes.
Let's go to Christian next, who asks, am I the only one that thinks Peyton Wilson can be the Steelers' next defensive star, or am I a little delusional?
No, I mean, everybody and their mother is talking about how Peyton Wilson's going to be a stud and look great in the preseason. I'll say this. I wasn't as high on Peyton Wilson as everybody else during the preseason debut. I think there was a couple of times where he could have made a play, didn't make a play, wasn't as physical as I thought he was going to be, wasn't as up as everybody else seems to think. But I think when used correctly, Peyton Wilson is a monster on the football field and has so much upside. So, yeah, I think he could be the next defensive star. I want him to find his role and a proper role in this defense, but I think he could be, yeah.
Let's go to Steven next, who asks, what are your top 3 things you're looking for in the next preseason game against the Bills?
That's a good one. That's a good one. I mean, I'm going to continue to look for the offensive game plan. I want to see the plays that Arthur Smith draws up, and I think in the second preseason game, you're going to get more than what you got in the first preseason game. So that would be a big one. I'm looking for a strong performance from Corey Trice, because if Dante Jackson isn't going to play, I want to see Corey Trice emerge as that cornerback 3 and really take a step forward. That's a big one that I'm looking for. And then on the offensive line, I want to see Broderick have a better game, man. I don't think he played very well against Houston. I want to see him play well against the Bills. Those would be my 3 this weekend.
Can I add another one?
Yeah.
I'd like to see Jack Coletto actually be utilized to see what we have out of him. I mean, they've been teasing it all preseason.
They have.
Let's see, are we actually going to do this, or are we going to end up cutting him and everybody got excited for nothing? So I want to see some Jack Coletto this weekend.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very good one. Some Jack. Give me a little bit of Jack Coletto. Mitching for. I need. I got an itch, and the only cure is some Jack Coletto.
Let's go to not Christopher Walken, but Christopher Westbrook, who says, is the Aiyuk drama actually over? Thank God, even though I want the Steelers to get him, I'm tired of waiting and talking about it.
No, unfortunately, it is not even close to being over. But there is plenty of optimism in San Francisco. I will say this. I know that the thumbnail says that it's over. I meant training camp, and I apologize. I said to Nick before we jumped on here, as people were tossing in the comments, I was like, dude, I didn't even realize that that's what we were talking about. Like, I thought people would pick up on the training camp. No, it's not over yet. Although the optimism is growing in San Francisco. I don't know what's going to happen. I would expect a resolution within the next couple of days, but I think everything that's come out in the last 24 to 48 hours is just complete nonsense. And it's just re-reports of everything that's happened. So, yeah.
Let's go over to Steven's question, which is, how reliable does Calvin Austin look at camp?
Very, very reliable. The dude is open all the time. He doesn't drop passes. That's never been a concern. He just looks like he's more capable of doing what Calvin Austin does, and that's create space, use his speed, and play much bigger than he is. Like, I think that was the one thing I kind of felt like Matt Canada put a lid on this guy and said, you're a small gadget guy. We have to utilize you there. I think in a good Arthur Smith offense, he could be utilized as Calvin Austin, who has many more facets to his game than just being a small, speedy receiver.
DKB17 says, what was your moment growing up that you decided, yeah, the Steelers are going to be my team?
I became a Steelers guy young. My older brother was a Steelers fan. My dad was a Broncos fan, and I went back and forth for a couple of years. Eventually, I just said, "Hey, I'm going black and gold, man. This is it." And then my sister painted me, like, she's an artist, and she painted me some like Steelers jersey for one of my birthdays when I was a kid, and I was just like, "Well, there it is. Now I can never go back." So here we are.
Let's move over to Wesley Smith, who asks, do you think Pittsburgh is willing to pay a wide receiver since they're planning to part ways with some other vets like potentially Cam Hayward? And do you think there are any other vets that could be on that list?
I don't believe that they part ways with Cam Hayward. Not yet, at least. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee that he resigns, but I don't believe that's going to be the outcome. I do think they're willing to pay a wide receiver. They've made that very clear that they're willing to pay a wide receiver. If I had to guess, it's going to be Brandon Aiyuk or somebody else. But yeah, they want it. And do I think any other vets could be on that list? Najee Harris is the big one. That might be it. You know, for right now, that might be it, because next year Larry Ogunjobi's contract expires. Who else? Landon Roberts' contract expires, but I think you could re-sign him for cheap. And then you got guys like Nate Herbig, whose contract expires, and you can move on. James Daniels, and you can move on from both of those guys.
Brian wants to know, with Aiyuk trade value being what they were, was getting Chase Claypool for a 32nd overall pick the biggest fleece of all time as the lights go down?
Yeah, easily the biggest fleece in Pittsburgh Steelers history. Could potentially be on that list, especially if Joey Porter Jr. turns into an even better player than he was a year ago. Easy. I mean, that's as crazy as it gets. Like, that was such a fleece. It was crazy. Chase Claypool for 32, man. What a wild time. Do I try to turn the lights back on?
Let's see it. I mean, you're on video, so let's see your best, like, jumping jacks.
I'll be back.
Olympic aerobics. I mean,
oh, it worked. It worked. All I had to do was
didn't even have to leave. He didn't even have to leave the seat. That's impressive, because before, I know you walked out during an answer earlier in training camp, and you said you were doing like cartwheels and stuff. Like, we should have turned the camera. You could have maybe gone to Paris earlier, and that didn't work, but this time it did.
I actually was on the phone with Simone Biles and just didn't work out. Didn't work out in the time. So it's all right.
Let's go over to Ronald's question next. Ronald wants to know, Noah, does Arthur Smith finally utilize Darnell Washington as a receiver, especially inside the 10-yard line, where he seemingly would be very hard to stop?
Yeah, I believe he does. I really believe he does. He looks like he has been doing that. I mean, they tossed a little floater up to Darnell in the end zone the other day, and Darnell tried to get all fancy with a one-handed grab, and my mind immediately went, yeah, like, if you do that all the time, it's going to work 80% of the time. So I'm a big fan of it. I think Arthur Smith has some serious plans for Darnell Washington, and they're going to work out very well.
Matthew Torres wants to know, what are your expectations point scoring wise for the Steelers this regular season?
I mean, last year was like 15 points a game or some crazy number like that. This year, I would say 21 to 24 points a game is where I sit them. Scoring's down in the NFL, so you can't think it's anything crazy. 21 to 24 is a good number. I would say closer to 24, but 21 to 24.
Vibing with the Dogs wants to know, do you think anyone gets an extension before the season, or do they just let the guys play their contracts out and figure that out in 2025?
The two guys that I believe could get extensions this before the regular season, Pat Freiermuth would be one of them, and Cam Hayward would be the other. They're really the only guys that are up for extensions that I think sign extensions at any point. But yeah, those would be my two guys. I think Pat comes before Cam. I was surprised that Pat hasn't happened yet to this point. And Cam too, I think is in the works, but I honestly think that a wide receiver trade is playing into everything that's happening. So it might be a wait and see before everybody else signs.
Let's go to Carl Spackler that says, putting you both on the spot, if the Steelers went with Bruce Arians as head coach instead of Tomlin, do you think the Steelers would have had more, less, or equally as much success?
Less. I would definitely say less. I'm a big fan of Bruce Arians. I think he's a great coach. I don't think he clicked well with everybody that was here, I don't believe that he would have had the defensive success that the Steelers had. And I think he was obviously an offensive coach in a time where defensive football won games. So that's where it would have, maybe in today's day and age, he would have had more success. But from the time Tomlin was hired until right now, I think he would have had less.
We got a little bit of validation here from Eric White, so I wanted to toss this out. Says, guys, wanted to say thanks for the Pepe's recommendation. Flew out from LA a couple weeks back to visit some family in the area, and it was amazing.
Heck yeah. Shout out Pepe's, man. Appreciate you, Eric. Hope you had a good time. Hope the flight wasn't terrible. Hope you got something good. What's your go-to at Pepe's?
My go-to, I usually get the Big Nate, which I think is the steak and chicken on the same sandwich.
Yeah,
hard to go wrong with that.
Hard to go. It's good when like the dude is like 80, 400 pounds back there sweating. You know what I mean? Like you feel the grease. The grease is everywhere in that 5x5 box. And he's back there just cooking up your meal. And you're like, this is going to be delicious, man. It's going to clog an artery, but it's going to be delicious.
Let's go over to the next question, which is, if Fields or Wilson fail, could you see the Steelers pushing for Dak Prescott next year?
I don't think so. I think the next situation for the Steelers, if their quarterback situation doesn't work out this year, is to go to the NFL draft. That being said, if I came into this season, if you told me in February, or if you told me last July that the Steelers were going to look to trade for Brandon Aiyuk, I'd tell you you're crazy. So who knows? Who knows? But I would say my best guess, if those guys don't work out, is to go to the NFL draft.
Let's go to an offensive line question here, which is Dan Moore going to be the starting left tackle?
I don't believe so. I mean, Jerry Dulac came out with a report the other day saying that Troy Fautanu is going to be the starter on the right side. If that's the case, Broderick's going to be the starter on the left side. So I would say no. That being said, Troy's injury plays a major role into that. I'd be a little bit surprised if he doesn't come back within like the next week. He starts week 1, maybe week 2 he starts, but he's going to need some practice days before he's ready to get back out there and start at right tackle in the regular season.
Let's go to Potatoes Salad, who says, how we doing, guys? Any predictions on points per game allowed this year? I think we held opponents to 18.4 last year. Do you think they do better or worse this season?
I would say just about the same. 18.4 is a good number. Anything below 20 is a winning team. I would say 14 to 18 points is where you're going to keep them. They're going to be less tired, so hopefully it's on the lower end of that, but I would say 14 to 18 points is where I'm going to guess.
Let's go to Jonathan Holland in another comparison. He says, do you think the offensive line is going to be any better than last year's offensive line?
Yes. I mean, yes. You could ignore Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu and look simply at Zach Frazier. I mean, the upgrade over Mason Cole is crazy. That's the biggest one here. But yes, Zach Frazier, Troy Fautanu, Broderick Jones, Isaac Seumalo, James Daniels, that's a great offensive line. Like, that's a really good offensive line. And I believe that I believe that they're going to be twice as good as they were a year ago.
Jared Smith wants to know, would Michael Thomas be a viable option if the Steelers don't get Brandon Aiyuk?
Yeah, I think at some point he becomes an option for the Steelers. I wouldn't sign him until the day before the season because he doesn't need any ramp-up time, and he's so fragile that you don't want to just jump out there and say, hey, this is going to happen. You have to, we're going to sign him now because we're worried somebody else is going to sign him, and then he gets hurt a week into the preseason. I think it's a little early for that, but I think Juju is above Michael Thomas on that list when it comes to potential signings, just because from what I've heard, Juju's a name that they can trust and they look at and they say he's a part of this team already. He understands the Steelers way and so on and so forth. So if I had to guess, Juju sits above Michael Thomas, but I think Michael Thomas is on a list at some point. Yeah.
Steven has a question about Pat Freiermuth, asking, he never dropped a pass in the end zone in college. Do you think the Steelers use him this year as a huge end zone / red zone threat?
Yeah. I mean, Pat Freiermuth's going to be all over the field this year. Pat Freiermuth's going to be used in ways that he's never been used before. Because that's the thing, like Pat Freiermuth's only had one offensive coordinator in the NFL, and it was a bad one. So, I mean, he's going to be utilized all over the place, especially in the red zone. I think that Pat's going to be the biggest climb, the biggest emergence on the Steelers roster in 2024.
X Concept says, would a sub package make sense for Fields considering he has major fumble issues? Wouldn't it be even worse coming in cold for just 1 or 2 plays a game?
I mean, maybe, but I don't think the Steelers care about his fumble issues until his fumble issues become an issue. I don't know what his fumble numbers are in the NFL. Like, does he have a bunch of fumbles in the NFL? I mean, if we're judging it off of the 2 missed snaps, I'm not judging anything off of those 2 missed snaps, except for the fact that maybe he took a step backwards in the quarterback competition. But I don't know. What's his fumble numbers look like in his NFL career?
I'm trying to pick those up here. We'll go to the next question as I look for that. Let's go to Sajan's question, who says, of the Steelers players that are going to be needing extensions, who are your top 5 must extend Steelers?
I don't know if there are 5. Pat Freiermuth is on that list of must extend. He tops that list. In a year, you're going to need to extend TJ Watt again, so he's on that list as well. I would extend Landon Roberts for a year after this season. That's 3. Jaylen Warren would probably be on that list as well. That's 4. I think that might be it. Like, that might be my whole list at that point. Dante Jackson, depending on how he looks during the regular season, how healthy he could stay, he would be on that list as well. That might be 5.
Justin Fields has 38 fumbles. 13 of them have been turnovers.
Okay, that's a lot of fumbles
in 40 games.
That's a lot of fumbles. It's a lot of fumbles. I mean, maybe coming in cold is better. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know if that's ideal. 38 fumbles is a lot of fumbles. So we will we'll see. I don't know. Yeah, I did not know that. That is a lot of fumbles. Like if that's the case, maybe you consider that, but I think the Steelers would have to see it in person before they go back and say, never mind, we're not going to do this anymore.
Let's go to Christopher's question next, which is, what are the chances Kenny's playing in the Eagles-Steelers game? And if so, who wins that game?
There, I'd say 0, unless Jalen Hurts gets hurt. I mean, that would be the only way that Kenny plays in that game. If he wins the backup quarterback job, we'll see. Everybody's like, oh, Kenny Pickett looks so good in the preseason game. He went 0 for 4 with passes over 10 yards. So, I mean, judge that as you will. Yeah. Like, I don't know. The only way he'd play is if Jalen got hurt. If he did play, I would put my money on the Steelers, but I think I'd put my money on the Steelers either way. Although I didn't like, you look at the Eagles roster, man, and they're just beyond loaded. Like, Kenny threw a touchdown in the preseason game to Will Shipley, and my mind, everybody was like, oh, Kenny Pickett with a touchdown. My mind was like, Will Shipley's on the Eagles? How did that happen? Who let that happen? Yeah, that team's stacked. So I don't know. I'd hope the Steelers, but we'd see.
Brian wants to know, you mentioned we could target a receiver since we obviously proved we can pay them. Who would be your realistic choice based on the Steelers' cap space?
I mean, realistic choice outside of Brandon Aiyuk would be CeeDee Lamb, I guess. Like, he's the next best option, I believe, in a realistic presence. Like, if you were to ask me, Noah, who's the wide receiver that you would want the Steelers to trade for, my answer would be Tyreek Hill, because I just think he's incredible, and he can fit into any offense. He can fit into any game plan. He makes every team better. He is ridiculous. He would be my answer. But in a realistic sense, I mean, CeeDee Lamb comes in here, 1,700 yards, 12 touchdowns last season, 32 touchdowns in his NFL career. His worst season comes as a rookie with like 935 yards and 5 touchdowns. In Pittsburgh, that's a hell of a year. Like, that's a ridiculous year the last couple of seasons. So I would say CeeDee Lamb. I think he costs $30 million a year. You could probably get him for maybe 32, which might be pushing it. But again, in 2 years, it's all relevant. Like, that's what you got to look at. Like, in 2 years, George Pickens' deal, if he's on the route that he's on now, is 35 plus a year. Like, that's crazy. Jordan Addison's next deal is going to be worth 36, 37 million a year. Like, I don't know. I think CeeDee would be the other realistic option, but I don't know what realistic is at this point.
Let's go to Wesley Smith, who asks, do you guys wish the Steelers would have signed Tyler Boyd, considering how things have looked in the wide receiver market since?
I mean, maybe, but I don't think Tyler Boyd moved the needle. Like, Tyler Boyd's a wide receiver 3. I don't think he brings any more upside than Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Van Jefferson, those guys. Like, he's better, obviously, but he fits the same role as a wide receiver 3, and you have some young guys with some upside. I don't think Tyler Boyd would have been on my list. Calvin Ridley might have been on my list. Maybe. Like he would have been a name, but I don't think Tyler Boyd would have been.
Let's go to Dalton's question next. With Adoree and J.C. Jackson, as well as Gilmore, Xavier Howard, Eli Apple, and Ahkello Witherspoon, all free agents and a huge cornerback hole, what are the Steelers waiting on?
To see what they have in Corey Trice. That's exactly what they're waiting on, to see what they have in Corey Trice. It's been a slow go for Corey Trice. He's now out there. They're going to give him a preseason game. It's the same reason that they're waiting as why are they waiting? Like, what are they waiting on? Well, they're waiting to see what they have, and there's no rush because all of those names, let's not include Eli Apple, are out there. And maybe Xavier Howard potentially also off the list with the stuff he's dealing with off the field. But Ahkello Witherspoon, Stephon Gilmore, Patrick Peterson, J.C. Jackson, all still out there. There are too many names. Like, you're not in any rush to go get somebody. And at the same time, I believe that they want to see what they have in Corey Trice. And if he works out, great. They don't have to worry about it. If he doesn't work out, they'll recalculate and they'll figure it out there. But they're gonna play this one slow for sure.
Leandrew 25 asks, going into the 2024 season, which head coach seat is the hottest in the AFC North?
I don't know. Kevin Stefanski's would probably be the hottest. And then, yeah. I mean, it's probably pretty cool. Like, it's not very
reigning coach of the year.
Yeah, like I don't know, man. I don't know. Can that happen? Can you win coach of the year and then be fired like the next season or 2 seasons? I don't think I have an answer to that one. I'll tell you this, like, GM wise, Andrew Berry's got to be the name there, because I mean, if Deshaun Watson looks terrible this year and you wasted all that money on a guy, fully guaranteed contract, just messed your entire organization up for years to come, that one's on you. But I don't know. I don't think any of them are real hot. Tomlin would be the answer if he didn't sign a contract, but even then, Tomlin's here till he doesn't want to be here, whether you want that to be the case or not.
Let's go to Gooseman, who asks, do you think signing Treylon Burks would be good if the opportunity arrives?
I think if the opportunity presents itself, yes. Even if you trade for him for a low round draft pick, I think that makes sense. I don't know if the Titans are going to because of the DeAndre Hopkins knee injury, but maybe. I think Treylon Burks has some upside. I think he could be an outside option behind Van Jefferson and George Pickens, which the Steelers still need to find one of those. I think that makes some sense for Pittsburgh if that's the direction that they wanted to go in, and I think he'd be super cheap.
Let's go to Forever's question, which is, what does Tomlin have to do to get coach of the year?
I don't. That's such a tough question. Like, do you have an answer to that one? You'd have to win 13 games. Russ would have to look unbelievable, or Justin would have to look unbelievable. The Steelers would have to have some attention for more than their 4-game playoff push that they're going to make at the end of every season. Like, and he'd probably have to win a playoff game or two, but I mean, Kevin Stefanski didn't have to do that. So I don't know. Those awards are a lot of time are like based off narrative, and the Steelers are such a boring football team. It's hard to say that.
I think this is the year, though, for him. If it's ever going to be a year, this is the year. Why? Because one, he has Hard Knocks, which is going to be more national exposure. That's a small part of the reason, not a big part. 2, look at the schedule down the stretch, who they have to face. And 3, if they get the first seed in the AFC, which is a big if, I think that's the path. That is the thing. If he gets the number 1 seed in the AFC because of everything else, that'll get him coach of the year this year.
Yep, that's a good one. I think all those things add up. I agree. Hard Knocks is a big one. I forgot about Hard Knocks. You get it. You're going to see a lot of Mike Tomlin on Hard Knocks. A lot. So yeah, that's true. That's true.
We got a couple more questions here. Let's first start with Vibin' with the Dogs, who says, does John Rice Plumlee get any snaps at quarterback during this preseason?
I hope so. 1 or 2, 5, I don't care, man. Play him a wide receiver, play him a kick returner. I'm loving the John Rice Plumlee show. I don't want it to end. I hope he makes the practice squad or something. But yeah, I don't know. If I had to guess, probably not, but he could get like a couple of series, maybe a 2-minute drill at the end of the game against Buffalo, or maybe in the third one against Detroit. I couldn't tell you. If I had to guess, no.
And let's finish it off with Justin's question, which is, would you trade for John Mechie III out of Houston?
I would, yeah. I mean, I don't know what they'd be asking, but I definitely would. Like I would toss him a 4th round pick and feel pretty okay with that. And you know, kind of go from there. Mechie to me is a guy with a bunch of upside, more upside than Treylon Burks, and he's going to cost more than Treylon Burks, even though he's done less. But he still hasn't done anything in the NFL. So you're banking on upside, you're banking on potential. But I would say yes.
We got one from Lee Andrew that we'll answer as well that says, of all the quarterbacks in this upcoming draft, who do you think the Steelers should go after?
Oh, who do I think the Steelers should go at? I mean, if I had to pick one, it's Carson Beck, and everybody hates me for the Carson Beck take. And I hope that he turns into an absolute superstar, no matter where he ends up, just so I could be right on that one. Because Carson Beck is the guy I'm aiming for. Maybe Ewers, who's also. I'm just trying to think realistic. Like if you're really thinking of somebody, I mean, Drew Aller's a great one. Shadur Sanders is obviously the big name. Who's the dude out of? There's some dude out of LSU who's supposed to be an absolute stud. He would be a name as well. Those would all be up there, but I think they're going to be too high for the Steelers to select. Whereas I think Ewers, I think Aller, I think potentially Beck are all like low enough that the Steelers can make a move for them.
And that's a wrap for questions today.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here for the last time here at St. Vincent College at 2024 Pittsburgh Steelers training camp. It's been an honor. It's been an absolute blast. I can't thank you guys enough for following along every single day and jumping onto these live streams. But don't worry, they're not going anywhere. We do this podcast every single day, and we will continue to do it every single day. We got the joint practice tomorrow. We will bring you all the updates that happen at the joint practice. Hopefully I can talk about some fights. I mean, you know, Chase Claypool, man, thoughts and prayers. Hope was it a toe injury? Hope the toe is hurt, is doing better. You know, season ending, was hoping he was out there. That being said, we're going to bring you everything on top of the Brandon Aiyuk drama, the quarterback battle, and as we prepare for Friday nights or Saturday nights. It's a Saturday night game.
Yep.
Game against the Buffalo Bills. With that being said, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/allsteelerstalk. Find us anywhere you get your podcast. And as always, check all of our workout at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.